Hello everyone, welcome back. I want to talk today about recent events, in fact. Things that have been happening not just here in Canada where I'm speaking from, but America, Europe, basically around the world. Which has to do with, of course, my favorite topic because I live under it and am oppressed by it. Fascism that we all have to deal with, whether you see it as fascism or not. It's crept in, it's here. Mostly, if you want to control the people, you need to control the courts. And in Canada, all of the judges are politically appointed. No judge in Canada has ever answered a question from a member of the public. It has never happened, and it will never happen. Fascists like it that way. Political leaders like to be in control. Once you've got that much power, what was that woman's name? She was called the Iron Lady in England. She was a close friend of Ronald Reagan, the President of the United States. Isn't that funny? I can't think of her name right now. However, she said when she was leaving number 10 Downing Street, she said, "No one willingly lets go of the reins of power." I understand the intoxication of it, and here in Canada, the reins of power belong to the government of Canada always refers to the Crown. The government never says the government does anything, it's the Crown that does it. And to be correct, the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II, is the head of the government of Canada. She is, of course, unelected. And the government of Canada doesn't, in my experience, does not like to take responsibility for the decisions it makes. It refers to it as, well, that's what the Crown decided. Well, Queen Elizabeth is not here deciding anything. And the government of Canada will destroy Canadians like me, and has destroyed me as well as they can. They have sicked the police on me. They've got Revenue Canada climbing all over me like, God, it's unbelievable what we do here. But anyway, let me get back to, in Europe, of course, they're looking at a little problem with their governments and how they're all going to stay together with this association that they've developed in the European Union to use a common currency. And it meant, of course, that nations had to give up their nationality. And it seems impossible for me that this would be true, but it's part of the globalism idea, which has been put forth by many people. George H.W. Bush, in particular, comes to mind. And in Canada, we had a prime minister from Quebec. His name was Brian Mulroney, and he's one of the biggest globalists I can think of in the world. Stephen Harper wasn't any different. They seem to have this idea that Canada has to go into a melting pot with all the other nations in the world, and there will be just one world government. And it looks like that one world government is going to be the United Nations. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but the United Nations spends a lot of time discussing Israel, and Israel's part in the Middle East is not just a little bit critical, it's extremely critical of Israel's, I would say even Israel's existence. I know a man, his name is David Spangler. I met him only once. In northern Scotland, and I spoke to him only briefly, and I had this question. I'll tell you what the question is. Why does he say, he's in the United Nations, and I've forgotten now what his portfolio is. It has to do something with globalism, of course, and the rise of Satan, which he calls the light bearer, the bringer of light, and the New Age. He's part of the New Age movement, and as he says, you must swear an oath to Satan. You must embrace Satan, the light, and he will bring you the light. Now, this is a very interesting comment. And if anyone has anything to do with Bible and creation, I totally believe in creation. Then you have a little problem with that statement. It's some truth and a big lie. The big lie is this: Satan didn't make light. He may be able to bring it, but he didn't make it. Well, what does it say in Genesis? Let there be light. Now, in Genesis, it doesn't say that Satan said that. It doesn't say that at all. Yet, here's David Spangler from the United Nations saying we have to embrace Satan. Well, I don't think I have to. He says, well, you just don't understand. You don't understand. They talk to you like you're a little child, that you can't think. And we are taught not to think. I'm sorry to say it, but it's true. If you look at it objectively, if you could stand back from all of the feed we get from my internet, I'm on the computer quite a lot. I don't have a television anymore. They shut it down because, it's a long story. I don't miss the television at all. And we have journalists here in Canada who are rewarded for protecting the government by the government will give them a seat in the Senate, which is a job you have until you're 75 years of age, and you're extremely well paid, and you have honors, and you walk around puffed up. You only have to come to 4 meetings a year, I believe it is. I may be wrong on that issue, but I think it's about 4 a year. It's basically money for nothing. And so the journalists all want that job. So what they do is they protect the government. We have a national television and news reporting network called the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC. CBC is very left-leaning. They have always been left-leaning since I was a child. I noticed this. Like, they really don't like anything right-wing at all. No conservatives. They never. I think I've gone through this before in one of my other videos. So the National News Organization is heavily slanted. Mostly that means the Liberal Party, for anybody who doesn't know, or the NDP, New Democratic Party. The Conservatives, they get short shrift, let's say, from the national media. And I've always noticed this, but I noticed in the national media, we have he's just retired, his name is Peter Mansbridge. And Peter Mansbridge used to say, and he liked to put his finger on his bottom lip. He's a man who has a grade 11 education, I believe. I'm quite sure I'm correct on that issue. He would say when he was interviewing somebody about important things, that have happened either in Canada or worldwide, and he would put his finger on his lip and he'd say, give us a sense, if you will, about what this all means. Now, basically, what we have been, we're spoon-fed. Pre-digested food. We don't have to digest it even. People like Peter Mansbridge are doing it. It wouldn't just be him actually, because he's got a tremendous backup of people who they're sanitizing news. Let's say, because if you compare the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation to the British Broadcasting Corporation, it's like day and night. Like, how come the British guys? I like them. I tune in every once in a while just to see the way that they report news. It's disaffected. They have no emotion in it at all. It's quite refreshing, in fact. It's almost like, this happened today, that happened today, that happened today. Now here's the weather. Now, there's a picture of the Queen. Hello, Queen. Hope you're doing well. That Harry got married fabulously, didn't he? Better wedding than that William guy. He'll stiff up a lip, Anyway, I'm having fun with the royal family just because they're so out there right now. We've never had so much information about the royal family. In fact, Queen Elizabeth II owns 1/6 of the world's landmass. I bet you didn't know that. She owns 1/6 of it. It is hers. Interesting. So, unelected, by the way, and actually not the right monarch. The real monarch lives in Australia. Even the people in England who keep track of the monarchy and they're sort of in charge of all those titles and stuff, they did the BBC actually did a documentary to hunt down the real monarch. And they found him, and he lives in Australia. And they interviewed him. I watched the interview, and he said, yeah, I always thought it's me. And they said, well, don't you think you should actually be on the throne? And he laughed, and he said, that's a nice thought. I don't know if anybody remembers Crocodile Dundee, Mr. Hogan. You know, if you were to go to England and say, you've got the wrong monarchy, we need to replace the monarchy with the true monarch who lives in Australia, as Paul Hogan would say, that's going to go off the boil. You're going to get a guy who's traveled 13,000 miles. I've forgotten how the Australians say 13. They don't say 13. 13 or something. They have an interesting way of speaking. So they would not change their monarchy, even though they admit that we got the wrong one. However, there's no way to change these kind of things. We all believe the lie that we're told, and you're not expected to ask any questions, because if you ask questions, well, then people like the police look at you like, you're not my tribe. As Justin Trudeau, our new Prime Minister, says, if you don't think like him, he's a man of intolerance, then, as he says, you're not in my tribe. And that was he did this in a commencement ceremony for in New York State of graduating students. And I watched the highlights of his speech, and I thought, you are intolerant, man. And it's like, in fact, he refers to some Canadians, mostly men in Canada, as Neanderthals. Believe it or not, he refers to us as Neanderthals. And he uses the F word at will. And every once in a while he has an uncontrollable urge to whip off his shirt and photobomb weddings, mostly, in Canada. Not in his home province of Quebec, because he's got some problems in Quebec. He's loading up our immigration. We are bringing in 1 million people in 3 years, and they get paid. Immigrants get $2,400 Canadian dollars a month to live on, and that's a lot of money. I don't make anywhere near that, and I know a lot of people who don't make anywhere near that. That's in your pocket, $2,400. So where do these people come from? Well, we've got a lot of Syrians here right now, and a lot of them are of the Muslim faith, Islam, I guess. And there's been recent newspaper articles in Canada that say that the youth of the immigrants are radicalizing in Canada because Canada's just too nice. So how did we get them? We have a thing here called the CF-18 fighter jet, which it's the F-18 from the United States, which Canada bought years ago. And during the time of the former premier and of this one, we were bombing the shit out of Syria. We bombed their markets, we bombed their roads, we bombed their bridges, we bombed their water treatment plants, we bombed their food processing plants, their hospitals, their schools. We bombed it all. And when the first Syrian immigrants came to Canada, Justin Trudeau put his hand on his breast and said, "You're home now." Well, we just destroyed their home. That's a fact. We blew it up. Then he stopped the sorties when it became clear, like, you don't have a place to live because we destroyed it. And we're going to put you up in Yellowknife or someplace where it's minus 50 for 10 months of the year. And you got to fight off polar bears, which, if you listen to the global warming people, they're all dead. Well, they're not all dead. They're coming further south. You would think they'd be getting away from the heat. Well, they're coming down. Man, people are finding them where they've never found them before. They're coming so far south. However, let's go back to the globalism, which is taking over this place. And you have people who, I'm going to bring him up. His name is Donald Trump, who believes in America so deeply. And I'm glad he does. We used to believe in Canada, too. But Canada is nothing, not even remotely like when I was a child. Not even remotely close to what it was when I was a child. We used to have English common law, and you could protect yourself from the abuses of the Crown. Now you can't do that in Canada. The judges of Canada all take their direction from Parliament. They're not independent. They have no authority whatsoever over the Crown. None. Zero. But they have authority over the people. And I've been before many judges, and I tell you, they really enjoy beating you up or holding a sword over your head. They really like it. But they don't do it to the Crown. Even when I have brought up to the judge that the Crown's lawyer, which we call them Crown Counsel here, they lie to the judge. Mostly women, but men do too. But mostly women lie to the judge, and mostly judges are males in Canada. And this criticism that I have is also brought up by other people. Even the top judge in Canada, who didn't study law, she studied philosophy. Somehow she became the top judge here. I'm not sure how that happened. She says, we have a gender bias. Yes, we certainly do. Justin Trudeau keeps talking about equality for women. Well, equality is great unless you're the one that has to be equal. And then you're not going to want to be equal. And just to put a finer point on it, most of the incarcerated people in Canada, I believe it's over 90%, are male. Let's say it's 90%. 10% are female, but the majority of our population is female. So if we had equality, don't you think it should be like 50-50 here? And here's a good statistic for you. The 10% that are women, the majority of them are First Nations people, First Nations women, not white women. You know, we have a good case here in Canada where the RCMP prosecuted a man who's in the Senate. His name is Mike Duffy. He was a close personal friend of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who brought us our Constitution of 1981 and turned Canada into a fascist state. He brought us Napoleonic Code, which he was trained under. He was a lawyer from the province of Quebec. They don't have English common law. We have it in Canada, but Quebec does not have it. And so he was fiddling the books and robbing the place blind. And I mean that in a nice way. So when he got to court and the RCMP have the goods on him, he's guilty. The judge listened. It went on for days, this courtroom case. Went on for days. And he's a journalist too, by the way. So in the end, the judge says this: well, I don't agree with everything that Mr. Duffy did, but on the whole, everything is okay. I dismiss the charges against him. Then the judge did one more thing, because another woman named Pamela Wallin, also a journalist, she's next up to be prosecuted by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And she lives mostly in New York City. She has she owns a suite on Park Avenue. She was next. So the judge warned the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, you bring Pamela Wallin here, one of you guys are going to prison. So it was already done. The fix was in. The government had contacted, I'm sure you'll never get it. They will never, I get letters back because I write letters asking questions. And Privacy Commissioner Canada will write me back and say, you are never going to get that information. It will never happen. No, it will not. In a fascist state, information is a secret. I live in a secret society. We have secret proceedings, secret hearings. My lawyer friend, who's been trying to help me, who doesn't contact me anymore because my telephone, I have a cell phone now, I don't have a house phone. I'm being bugged. My mail is still being opened. I just got a piece of mail, I'm looking at it over there. They taped it all back together and they wrote 15 on the front. They have these, Canada Post is one of the world's largest spy agencies here. It's their delivery of mail. And they're monitoring, this is some years ago when I first caught on to this, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are monitoring 2 million Canadians. Now, I even spoke to their lawyer, a woman lawyer in Ottawa, and she said, Mr. Wheaton, that can't be true. I said, it certainly is. It was in the newspaper. She says, what newspaper? I said, you know what, I'm going to mail it to you. So I clipped it out, I put it in an envelope, and I mailed it to her. So then I tried to contact her again by phone. On hold, on hold. She does not want to come back on the line and say, you're right. The police told me there's no such thing, but you're right. I am right. And I think it's more than 2 million now. It's probably closer to 5 or 10 million people. And as my lawyer friend said, once you get on their list, there is no way to get you off. And the reason for that is job security. A lot of people need this job. And it's, like my lawyer friend said, if you want revenge, here's your revenge. You have cost the government of Canada, the Crown, many millions of dollars to monitor you. He said, see all this mail? I keep the mail that they open. I don't throw it away. I keep it. I've been in courtroom, and the judge looks at all this mail that's been opened. They look at me, and if they had a rock, they'd throw it. The last thing a judge in Canada would ever do is to let you have justice. They're paid to make sure you will not find it. There are 45,000 unheard cases in Canada. We're all prosecuting the Crown for things that are very similar to mine. The Crown will not hear it. The judge will not hear the case. They just say, 30 days more for the crown. I've gone through this so many times, it's sickening. I even hired 2 lawyers. They both had the same problem I did. In the end, the lawyers say to me, this is impossible. This, the judge can't do. My experience so far in Canada, a judge may do anything, and that is consistent with a fascist regime. That is consistent. No judge has ever answered a question from the public. Nobody. So here we go. I think globalism is well on its way, but it's got a little stumbling block with America, because the Americans believe so strongly in their country. The only other people I know that are like them are China. And China is copying Canada's system of justice, which is not a system of justice at all. Beverly Ann McLaughlin, when she retired, she says, it is a model for the world. The only country interested in it is China. Because it sounds, I mean, it talks a good line. It just doesn't walk it. And that's the way it is. I hope you're all doing well, but I want you to understand me. Think for yourself. Don't do the Peter Mansbridge thing. What does all of this mean? Because my poor brain hurts now. Your brain doesn't hurt. You can think. Think on your own. My lawyer friend has given me a lot of advice. God bless him. Because you see, these things that happen to you, these abusive things that happen to you in life, it's like the system wants you to snap. So they can have you, mostly I've written to so many prime ministers of Canada, I get, nice little form letters back. But they don't want to deal with it because they like it just the way it is. Margaret Thatcher, that was the name I was trying to think of. Margaret Thatcher said, no leader willingly gives up the reins of power. And if you have power over the people, if you have their rights in your hands, who would ever let go of it? Mao Zedong would never let go of it. Pierre Trudeau went to visit him when he was a younger man. He also went to see Fidel Castro. He was a big fan of the fascists of the world. He used to say the only way, they had the Cultural Revolution in China, an awful lot of people were killed by Mao Zedong. Unbelievable what they did. Dragged them through the streets. It's unbelievable. But Mr. Trudeau would say, well, it was the only way to control them. It was the only thing they could do. I don't know that it's the only option here. Why don't you let them vote for people? What's wrong with a good old democracy? What happened there? I'm going to end on this democracy thing because I've had so much trouble with democracy. I'm waiting for a response from Elections Canada, and I worked for Elections Canada once. Why does Jean Chrétien get to bribe his way into a democratic election, and he rigged it so he could get the seat? He paid a bribe to get the seat. He paid a bribe. Why wasn't he charged? You all have a nice day now. Like that Paul Hogan go, don't want it to go off the boil.